Hey, what's up, good people, and welcome to another episode of our TechTrends podcast. My name is Kanali.
My name is Allan Niongira.
And yeah, so Allan, it's really good to, have you once again to just talk about a very interesting topic. So last week.
Last week.
Yeah, okay, nimesahau tuko 2025, but yeah, it's still it's the second or third week of the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, so last week, in our first episode of the year, we spoke about connectivity. Actually, so part of the wider topics we discussed in the first episode, and connectivity was a very big part of it. And the reason that came up is because, of course, how it's based on my experiences right now as a Kenyan. And of course, we've seen Safaricom brag about how their 4G connection is big. They're like almost 90% of the country, even maybe 100 that is connected to 4G. Airtel bragging the same. They're talking about 5G expansion as well in towns across Kenya. But where I come from, I always have a struggle. Like whenever I go home, even opening my laptop or even just my phone to hotspot, it's always a big struggle. Nikitaka actually, unless I go to a local shopping center hapo, tunazitanga center huko kwetu. So there's a place called Fafaro. It's actually a shopping center where I can at least get a 4G connection. But when I go back to our village in my Kasimba huko, I'm looking at 2G, 3G. You can't even hotspot. You can't stream anything, even on YouTube.
Yeah.
But actually, I've seen when I go to close to the road, najaribing kidogo kupata 4G, then inapotea. And that, again, connectivity. And that's why I think people like Starlink come in. You remember Starlink came into Kenya in May 2023, and we are in 2025. So it's been almost 2 years now. And of course, over the years since they came to Kenya, there have been lots of development. We've seen them, of course, suspend service at some point because of the uptake. Actually tells you how Kenya is actually,
consumers of
consumers of internet and consumers of Starlink, actually, to be precise. And a starting point will be one of the most interesting development that happened actually just the other day. So we saw Kenya, of course, CA, Communication Authority, coming out and saying, we want to increase the licensing fee for Starlink. And they're not increasing by 1%, 2%, 10%. It's actually by 1,000%. So remember, as I was telling you offline, so there's this thing that CA, or let me just say Kenya, calls the Satellite Landing Rights, SLR, which is actually the licensing fee that people like Starlink and any other satellite ISP requires before they actually set shop in Kenya. Which, of course, I believe people like Starlink,
there's also Mawingu.
Yeah, there's Mawingu. Yeah, people like Starlink actually did sign up for that or didn't actually pay that fee or get that license, be actually even just setting shop here.
Yeah.
And so there's a proposal. CA is saying for a 15-year license, we want to increase the licensing fee from actually $12,302, that's around 1.6 million shillings, to 115,331 USD. That's around that's around 14.8 million shillings. So that's 1,000% increase.
Yeah.
Okay. Not that we are against it, but what are your thoughts about this?
So I would take it from two sides. So, like, first, like, let's imagine I was Starlink.
Yeah.
So now, we wake up and we get the news our license has been increased from 1.5 to 15 million. Of course, like, considering like how huge like Starlink is, and then also considering like Elon Musk, honestly, like the based on his wealth, that's a little bit
it's kidogo,
that's kidogo for him. But then it will have an effect on their service service fees to the end consumer. And then on the other hand, I would looking at it from the local ISPs, basically local competitors to Starlink, it's also going to affect them, because at the end of the day, the fees won't apply to only Starlink.
Yeah.
They will also apply to the local ISPs, which means the competition continues and the play field, yes, it will be a little bit, maybe it could be neutralized, but then it has, on one side, it has an effect to the end consumer.
Yeah.
On the side of the government, in terms of like KRA, that's a big booster to them. Like the revenue collected from the licensing fees, that means it increases almost by the same percentage, 1,000%, which means on the side of the government, in terms of revenue collection, that's a huge boost.
Yeah, in fact, what CA is proposing in that regulation that was published in December, so CA is also, I mean, it will also require these ISPs, Starlink, the rest, to pay an annual fee equivalent to 0.4% of their total revenue. So there's that as well.
Yeah, so I think it's more of looking at it from, like, as a business person, basically my analysis is CA is looking at boosting, basically riding on the increased uptake of Starlink to generate more money. Yeah,
because actually before actually Starlink announced they're coming to Kenya in mid 2023, whether it would be very rare to scare people talking about satellite internet.
Yeah.
You know, we are used to local ISP, Safaricom, home fiber, Liquid Telecom and the rest. But conversation around satellite internet was very, very minimal until actually Starlink showed up.
Yeah, so perhaps like to set ground, it's before this increase, there was complaints from like the local internet providers in terms of like mainly complaining that the operations of Starlink was sort of like putting pressure in terms of like their offerings.
Yeah.
So the competition. So there was complaint of unfair competition from Starlink. Others sort of like questioning whether Starlink was licensed to operate here. So I think it's a good intervention by CA to sort of like confirm that we are aware that Starlink is operating in Kenya.
Yeah.
We are also aware of the competition, the ongoing competition, and we are also aware of the implications of Starlink operating here in Kenya. Sort of like it was a confirmation that we are aware, but then the end question continues: is the intervention of CA increasing the licensing fee a hindrance, or giving, making it easier for basically the Kenyans, making it easier for them to get affordable internet? Because remember, like, we have to link it also from our last conversation, which is the digital divide. We are a country that is pushing for
the digital economy.
We're also pushing for a 24-hour economy. So I think it's good to analyze the regulation change from that perspective. Is it making it easy or harder for Kenyans to get affordable internet?
Yeah, but as much as you're talking about, of course, there was complaints from other local ISPs about unfair competition. There was also complaints from Kenyans themselves about how they're getting raw deals with local ISPs.
Yeah.
For example, when Starlink came, they're offering very good deals. You look at what Safaricom is offering, what Liquid is offering. People were rushing to Starlink.
Yeah.
Of course, the hardware was very expensive, but people were still purchasing that because of the services they were getting.
Yeah.
And of course, as of December, actually last year, 2024, Starlink had grown by over 1,000% in the country, registering over 8,500 users. That's a big number.
Yeah.
And actually, a huge chunk of these users were within Nairobi metropolitan areas. Yeah, so unaangalia hapa Nairobi, Kiambu, all those areas surrounding Nairobi.
Yeah.
Areas, and until in November, Starlink was forced to actually suspend temporarily suspend or pause subscriptions in the country. And what they said in a statement, according to an article we did, the suspension was in response to an overload in network capacity driven by increased demand in these areas, which of course Nairobi and surrounding regions.
Yeah, I wish to be I wish to operate a company like Starlink that gets overload.
Yeah, and the affected areas are, of course, Nairobi, Kiambu, Machakos, Narok, Murang'a, and Nakuru. Okay. Where, of course, Starlink had seen significant uptake since its launch.
That shows the gap, the big gap that already exists.
Yeah.
And I know, like, we have been reliant on cable broadband connectivity. And then also, which is where also I like technology. A good technology will always disrupt the status quo. So I think with the Starlink coming, it didn't take long before this disrupted the market. Because at the end of the day, it shows you that people are in need of high-speed internet. And because now people are running businesses online, people are now consuming entertainment online, people are basically are attending school online. So it has become now part of the consumer utilities. Just like the way we pay for electricity bill, now internet has
gone.
If you went through anyone's, especially in the urban areas, you go through anyone's monthly budget, internet subscription is there alongside other subscriptions, which means up to this point, yes, CA was correct to come in, but then that is one of the regulations, like I would say, it's basically a reactive regulation.
Yeah.
How do we make money from this? But then also, like last time I mentioned, it's important that moving forward, the laws and new regulations follows consultative methods, where you consult not just from the ISP providers only. You also consult with the consumers. For instance, like I would say, I would love maybe to challenge. Did we have like surveys of these regulations?
Or public participation?
Yeah, because it's going to have a huge impact on the consumer.
Yeah, and let me just take you back to where this entire conversation, emanated from. So remember when I said since Starlink came to Kenya, there's been a lot of these developments. First, we saw, of course, Safaricom come out, writing a letter to CA. We saw another lobby group coming and suing Safaricom. And CA over Starlink. And let me first tell you what Safaricom was talking about. So Safaricom wrote a letter to CA, and it was urging, CA to exercise caution while granting independent licenses to satellite internet service providers like, Starlink. And Safaricom now was requesting in that letter for the regulator, which is CA in this case, to consider mandating Starlink and the likes to work together with local network operators. So Starlink, you're here, please come work with us. So Safaricom also stated that requiring satellite internet service providers to collaborate with local mobile operators rather than grant them independent licenses will promote innovation while avoiding potential damage. I'm not sure what potential damage Safaricom was talking about in this letter to CA.
That one you have to analyze it from basically what we are saying from competition. At the end of the day, with more people uptaking satellite-based internet connection, it means like Safaricom basically generates a lot of revenue from selling data bundles, right? They have also invested a lot of money in terms of laying ground for cables around Nairobi and other areas. but then here comes Starlink with no need to set up any infrastructure at all.
Yeah.
All you need is you just buy the kit, which means they have not incurred any cost except from manufacturing, which they are recouping through the purchase.
Yes.
So I think what they mean is like, okay, I think also it was a shock to Safaricom, considering that they are dominant when it comes to the data bundles, right? So now I think there was the letter is more of calling upon like CA to look at the position of Safaricom. In this case, here is a new technology that we weren't ready for. In terms of uptake. So how do we like mitigate the competition through now having a requirement where you can't operate if you don't work with us?
Actually, before we now come and talk about now what that increase means to the consumer, two things that CEO was proposing. Actually, one thing that CEO was proposing in the proposal now that was published in December, you spoke about infrastructure. So in addition to the proposed license fee hike, CA is also seeking to broaden the operational scope for these ISPs. So under these new guidelines, if you read the article we wrote on TechTrends, and you can also read the article actually on IT Web and Africa Builds Communities, satellite providers will be permitted to manage terrestrial cables, telemetry system, tracking facilities, and even conduct space research. And I like this because what does it mean? It means now, this move will pave way for people like Starlink to even now set up ground stations in Kenya. And of course, this thing, there's been so much delays around this. There's so much delays around this because of these regulatory issues. So maybe once these are published, now we'll see people like Starlink now setting ground stations in Kenya. We've seen people sharing photos on social media about tumeona Starlink inakaa ni ground station Starlink inajengwa mahali, which of course has never been really verified. But and that was actually last year, towards the end of last year. So maybe actually it would make sense why that conversation was there. But if Starlink and these other ISPs could now build ground stations here,
it means again, like at the end of the day, what if it can make it easy for like customers to access internet easier, it's always a win for a customer when there is competition. Because without this, the reason has been like, because of lack of options, we have no option like than to operate where we are. But then it shows you like people have willingness to pay as long as the service is better.
Because for me as a consumer, I want options. I want to have provider A, provider B, and of course I'll stick to the provider that is actually giving me the best service. Currently, even at the office here, at the studio, we're using Safaricom Business, home internet. Apart from, of course, the usual downtimes, we haven't really had a problem with them. The issue was actually when I was just requesting for a connection. It was just out of back and forth before I was actually even connected. At home, in my house, we use Safaricom Home Fiber. And of course, again, other usual downtimes, which at times they try to communicate. When they launched the new packages recently, we were given the 1 gigabyte GB to try. So we were among the people actually doing the trial for that. And the experience was very, very smooth. And so for Safaricom, what I complain because I've never really had a bad service with them. Of course, apart from the usual. But there are some people who actually wanaumia sana Safaricom. And that's why
so to cut you short, let me relate to like the experience I had juicy in town. So I was doing printing and I needed to send someone to send the print shop the file over the WhatsApp. And then the guy tells me, here the internet doesn't connect. And to be honest, when I checked on my phone, instead of 4G, I saw 3G.
In Nairobi.
So I had like to move with my laptop outside, then I went somewhere connected to nika connect to 4G, then I sent the file and then nikarudi na laptop. But even before going ahead, what you just said imenikumbusha the you mentioned in terms of like when you are requesting your connection, your back and forth. I think also the increase in uptake also ilichangiwa na the fact that with the Starlink kit, you don't need anyone to come. Yani unaingia tu kwa shop, unachukua tu yo kit, it's a plug and play. You don't need technical expertise to connect to what. They just show you, just put this kwenye unataka i-connect, then chukua cable, weka tu kwa nini kwa router, then ingia kwa laptop, connect na internet. That convenience, iyo beats everything else yenye unaweza, because otherwise now you have to get someone kutoka Safaricom akuja kuconnectie. You have to wait, uwekwe kwa wait list. With Starlink you hakuna. Convenience also is key.
So two things. Of course, I told you we've seen how big Starlink has grown. Nilikuwa nakwambia we've seen even people like counties like Murang'a County moving to Starlink. We've seen our friends here at the Kenya Wall Street moving to Starlink. We've seen a lot of people moving to Starlink. But two things why I can't buy a Starlink right now in Nairobi for me. First, even where our office right now, there are a lot of tall buildings around. So there are a lot of distractions. So Starlink won't really be really usable for us here. But I'll buy it to go and take it home in Kitale where there's open air. No distractions. So it will work very well there. So that's why I can't really buy Starlink here in Nairobi. But village, yes, I can. Will you buy Starlink?
So for me, honestly, I'll buy. Like you mentioned, for me, honestly, I would buy because of, which is something we need to talk about, the speed.
The speed.
Like the packages for like the speed you get, like 200 Mbps. That is crazily high speed that you're not able to get as at the moment from Safaricom unless you are on the Safaricom business.
Usually, I always don't like to talk about the speeds because I've never really experienced to use Starlink. So I always have my reservation around that because I've seen people complaining about the upload speed, download speeds. I don't know. I've seen people complaining about, kukinyesha, ni kama, dish.
It
affects. And I don't know, a lot of things. But as we wind up, so 10 things we've picked from this short episode around Starlink, right? So Starlink came to Kenya in mid-2023. So it's been like 2 years now, almost heading to 2 years. And they offer a variety of plans, including a 30.9 monthly residential plan. And for the mini kit, around 208.38. Then there's Safaricom, because those are the biggest players that we had a conversation around in this podcast. So Safaricom as well offers plans, including platinum plans, offers gigabyte speeds for home use. And now that's where the two of them come. So there's competition. So Starlink entry to Kenya market introduced competition with Safaricom. Let's not talk about Airtel or anything else. So there's competition between Safaricom and Starlink. And Safaricom responded to Starlink entry by upgrading its existing plans. We really covered that widely, on our platforms. And of course, the two of them have been involved in a lot of, should I really call them legal battles? But it may be legal because we've seen, Kituo Sheria taking Safaricom and CA to court around that. We've seen Safaricom writing a letter to CA talking about how Starlink needs to be regulated. And now from this development, we've seen CA announcing the increasing licensing fees for satellite ISPs like Safaricom. So basically that's a summary of what we've discussed about. And of course I look forward to see what this means to the consumer and how now the consumer respond to it. And once these regulations are published by CA, because they were published in December, so once they take effect, I want to see how now Starlink or
Response.
or they respond to it. Yeah.
It will be interesting to see how each of them will respond.
Yes.
It's also good, like for instance, to pick the conversation and see, like as the end consumers, it's good to also maybe share opinions to like how we feel this could affect the end consumer. Na pia to also from a business perspective, like tuangalie the effect long term in terms of like, okay, short term, this generates revenues, especially for the government, which means boosting the economy on one side. But also tuangalie on the other side, the consumer is already complaining about high internet cost of
prices,
living, high internet prices. So which means any increase in terms of the pricing, the only people who can afford are the ones who are going to continue enjoying good internet, which means also as much as the intentions are good in terms of like increasing access to affordable internet, then that becomes it will get to have a negative effect. But on the other side, it's also good to have like CA intervene in terms of like, instead of leaving the ground for the two ISPs to sort of like try to figure themselves out. It's good for them to intervene. But my advice to them is, please consult on the ground and tuangalie tu, like for instance, after the announcements, how are people responding, and then before publishing the final one, it would be good to have like, even I would honestly love like if we could have a representative from CA to sort of like break down
what that means,
and their sort of like background to sort of like making the change, what informed the change, and then see. But in the long run, as that unfolds, in a 2025 itakuwa more interesting.
A lot of things
and
to
then
watch out.
It's also good, like a lesson to us all, like how, of course, like technology comes to disrupt. Haikujangi in most cases, tech doesn't really ask for permission. It disrupts, and then it's up to the market to respond. Otherwise.
All right. Thank you so much. Really good the conversation. We're gonna continue as we move forward. Of course, we'll try to look for a rep to come here and join us for this podcast, just discuss this further and just what to expect to see in the near future. So thank you so much for joining us in this episode 2, season 3 of the TechTrends podcast. My name is Kanali.
My name is Allan.
I'll see you in the next episode.